What does it take to make workshops work? And how can we facilitate collaboration that sticks and leads to results? My name is Miriam Hatness, and with the Workshops Work podcast, I'm on the mission to find the magic ingredients that make workshops work. Today with me on the show is Shayne Smart, the MURAL architect, designer, producer for the Never Done Before Facilitation Festival. And we have a conversation about what it takes to create a template that works and how to guide groups through online collaborative experiences. So stay tuned. And by the way, if you don't have pen and paper at hand to take your own notes, why don't you visit workshops.work and download my free one-page summary. And now enjoy the show. Shayne, welcome to the show. It took me almost a year to convince you to join me on a podcast interview. And finally, I could convince you.
Yeah. Thank you for convincing me.
Yes. And it is the perfect moment that you couldn't say no anymore, because we just concluded the first edition of the Never Done Before Facilitation Festival. And you were the magician, architect, designer, producer behind the MURAL world. So I think I'm not the only one who's curious to hear about your thoughts of the festival from behind the scenes.
Yeah, well, thanks for calling it a world.
And before we go there, I always like to start an interview with a simple or difficult question. When did you start calling yourself a facilitator?
I think the first time was really back in 2013. I just joined a company called Explain, and a guy called Matt Moraski had said, I think, you've done some consulting. I think you'll be a good Explain facilitator. And that was about a year before. And I really felt that after a year that then I had it.
So what does it mean to you to be a facilitator?
To be a good facilitator, right? Because I think there's running the meeting, there's leading the meeting, there's creating a workshop or designing a workshop or guiding people through a workshop, and there's guiding people through a workshop where they felt exhilarated, you reached your goals, they were surprised, they had fun, it was more like a game. And I've forgotten your question.
What makes a good facilitator? What does it mean to be a facilitator?
So to be a good facilitator, I think you have to be really clear on what the goal is and lead people through an experience on the journey towards the goal that inspires them and that they enjoy. And so it's about that, but it's also about guiding the group. So often, a lot of the groups, I was really fortunate. I got to work with a lot of people who were really professionals in what they did. And so we didn't need to explore so much as extract the information from their minds. And when you're doing that, they already know what they want to say, but they lack an understanding of how to get there to communicate it to the target audience. So in that journey, what you're really guiding them through is the how. And in doing that, often, people come into a workshop from many different places, different mindsets, the day they've had, the month they've had, the week they've had, the thing they've really wanted to talk about, but nobody would listen to. And when you get all those people, you have these different emotional levels, and you really want to bring them, or at least for the workshops I mostly ran, is you want to bring them onto track and focus on the objective, the audience, and then lead them through an equal voice conversation. Some of the most satisfying things in a workshop is taking the quietest person in a room that nobody ever hears from and giving them the opportunity to, if not raise their voice, raise their Post-it notes so that they have an equal part of the conversation. And similarly, it's the person who is really passionate about what it is that they want to get across or achieve, but is so impatient or focused or worried about not getting the core message through that they just try to drown out everybody else. So in one group, you're telling them, hey, come speak up. We know you've got something interesting because you've been reflecting in that corner for a long time and you've got some great insights. And the other one saying, hey, it's going to be okay. We've got some great ideas coming out from the other part of the room. Let's bring them all together and then see where we go with that.
And your superpower is to use templates, or now, since we're completely in the virtual world, to use basically mural boards to create this journey for the groups so that they can find out the how and that they can contribute whatever they have to contribute. So yes. How do you translate then what you described as the key skill or the key task of a facilitator into this tool? Well,
so it's a good question, because when it comes to designing a workshop, you've got a couple of different methodologies. You've got Luma, which is kind of this fixed set of methods you can use. You've got liberating structures, which is really about how to coordinate and work with people together at the moment. And the one that I spend the most years on, almost 10 years now, is game storming. And so you're trying to develop things into games, and it naturally uses visual thinking. So most of the activities that you do are either a canvas, which has been pre-ready made, or sometimes a canvas that you need to create on the fly, which is usually a coffee break. Hey, everybody, we're going to have a coffee break now. The workshop's taking a different direction. All right, let's go draw. And so when it comes to canvases, then I think there's a lot of similarities between it, is that if you have a series of separate poster canvases, you have this advantage that you can kind of reveal the workshop as it goes. And when it comes to digital canvases, MURAL, Miro, etc., then you need to present enough information that people understand the high-level flow of the day. But in part, you don't want to reveal too much, because what you find is the really smart workshop participants, they will give you an answer now, which makes their life easier later. Or they'll give you an answer now, which already drives to the pre-gone conclusion in their mind, but not the mind of the other 19 people in the workshop. Yeah. So, there's some nice hiding features and things like that, but often it's providing enough instruction to understand what you're going to do. But the detail of how you're going to lead 10 or 20 people through it, you leave to the spoken facilitation. Ideally and this is really where I want to go, is how do you provide both levels to different groups? How do you provide a template which is something people can look at and think, okay, I understand what's happening, and then flip a switch and nicely show them, okay, well, if you are doing this on your own, or if you're doing it in small breakout groups where one of you needs to facilitate each other, how can you reveal those instructions without visually cluttering the canvas, and then hide them again? So that's kind of the next thing I'm working on. None of the tools really support it well at the moment.
So what do you think do most people get wrong when they design templates for workshops?
I think the thing they get wrong is that they design templates for workshops. Just that fact. Because the template is the end point of having a really good method design or a really good pattern design. And so the template the exercise of designing the template is how you reveal it to the world, but it's not what is the hard work and good design of having a flowing set of exercises and methods. And you can think about pretty much any method, and I submit to the audience that you can translate that method into almost any tool.
What do you mean?
Well, so take something like privilege. Let's talk about privilege, shall we? So if you look at something like workshop, a common method to demonstrate privilege, and you see it quite often shown on TV, is what we'll do is we'll take a group of people and then we will extract people from the group as we go through to demonstrate their lack of privilege. So you might, in TV, you have a TV screen. In broadcast media, you line everybody up on a field and you say, okay, if your parents aren't divorced, take 2 steps forward. If you had a good opportunity at free education, take 2 steps forward. And then what you see, of course, is you see, I don't want to say underprivileged groups, because they're actually like normal groups who didn't get privileged, and many who are also disadvantaged. You take those groups and on the TV screen, you show it as a field. In a Zoom conference, you can do the same thing by having the Muppet Show of multiple tiers of video, and you can say, all right, if your parents are divorced, turn off your Zoom. And then you see it slightly black out. And both those things, what you're really trying to do is you're trying to elicit an understanding within the group that some people have had far more advantage than luck would normally present them. And what it feels like to not be part of that group, And when you're in Zoom and you see all these windows blacking out, or whether you're in that field way at the back while other people are running forward, you get exactly the same experience.
Mm.
So it's more about the method of what is the essential experience of the method. I mean, that's quite an experiential one.
Yeah. So do you...
Starting there with the method and the experience, and then working about how do I express it in the particular medium that I have.
Yeah.
And then once you have that, then you can think, am I drawing a template with boxes? Or am I drawing a template with names that I'm moving around dynamically? You know, a lot of templates we think create some content, and that's that place that it's created is where it resides.
Yeah.
But it could be sliding them up and down the template.
And maybe sometimes we don't need a template at all because the conversation will be deepest without visualization.
Yeah, that's not the world I come from.
I knew that you would disagree.
Yeah.
But I couldn't resist this little provocation.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time on workshops which had a really specific, clearly defined goal beforehand, which of course helps with any method, and usually a finite amount of time to do it. So you needed to stay really on track. And those kind of conversations, interestingly enough, maybe that supports your point, is when two departments were rivaling, for example, or two managers didn't get on, or people didn't really understand why they were there, or even why it was important. And in those moments, usually at that point, the workshop kind of goes on pause. We switch track, change channel, address whatever it is, and then continue. Unfortunately, I usually wasn't given more time. So we had to do that and then revert to track, which means when you're given a finite amount of time of the individuals and also to complete the challenge, what you end up doing is you have to find faster and more effective parallel methods to work in order to achieve the goal. So any of that kind of, I would tend to call them experiential workshops. If I wanted to change somebody internally, then I would give them an experience. If I want to answer a problem or a challenge or a piece of research, then I would give them a series of exercises to perform. And when you're performing exercises, then you can break it things. You can, just like any kind of modern processing, you break it into parallel. What can I do in parallel? What can I do in series? What needs to be in sequence? What can be out of sequence?
Can
Start
be
looking from that perspective. Yeah. Asynchronous, pre, post. Do we need to really discuss if the color is cornflower blue, or perhaps that could be done later?
But these are usually the topics that come up when a group tries to avoid a really important, very hairy challenge.
To address all the easy parts around it.
Yes. That's at least what I have observed. And then the skill of a facilitator is to bring them back on track.
Yes, and I would suggest that there's a great opportunity in there, which is not revealing the scariness of the problem in one go. Often people can solve the problem by not staring the giant in the face, but by looking at the ankles and the knees and cutting those off and then working the way to the head of the giant.
Yeah, and that's what I understood from what you explained earlier, that you don't want to reveal the entire workshop or all the different patterns from the beginning, because then some participants might anticipate. But what you want is them doing the small exercises and then having this huge aha moment where suddenly everything falls together and the decision is basically done for them, by them, through the steps. Right? Yeah,
that's absolutely correct. And I think the ding in the background was really confirmation. The universe confirming that it's true. But that's absolutely true. And it's not that they don't make all the decisions. It's that you break it down into a small number of decisions, which are sometimes binary decisions. You're looking at, is this true, yes or no? What is the ranking of these 5 items? What are the 5 things we're going to look at separate in more detail and then present, the pains and gains of the audience? And so every one of those steps is really simple. But if I say to you, all right, what is the product that we need to deliver to our available audiences? It can be totally overwhelming. If I ask you that as 10 questions, you can make decisions on each of them very quickly. And there's this non-linear relationship between the complexity of the decision you're making and your speed of answering. Because if you're the kind of normal person, you can remember 5 to 7 things pretty well. But you get groups where, people who are stressed and it's down to 3. People who are overwhelmed with PTSD, you're lucky if you can get one decision out of them. So if you take that approach, then somebody trying to model in their mind a multivariate solution, which has two variables, let's say you're lucky, it's 3 by 3, that's 9 choices. But if you ask 3 things at the same time, it's almost like you're asking them to consider a Rubik's Cube of choices, turn all the dials and solve the puzzle within a minute. Now, if I just ask you to make one turn, that's really easy. And before you know, you've solved the cube.
Yeah, guiding them through the challenge. Like that. Thank you. And I would like to now build a bridge between designing templates or visual guidance for groups in a workshop versus building templates that would guide visitors to an event, something like the festival that we built together.
Yeah. So
where was the main difference for you when you thought of the challenge for you as the architect of the mural between designing a template where you want a group to go from A to B and to design an environment or a landscape where you want visitors to also go from A to B, basically?
Yes, but A to B in space. There are a lot of parallels between them because if you think about designing a self-guided method represented as a canvas in an online tool, then you are largely, whatever it is that you're going to put out there is at some moment no longer yours to control. And it's kind of the scary and the exciting thing about it. The scary part about it is that when you let it go, anything that you forgot to inform them about is kind of like a freeway on a mountaintop with no guardrails. It's like, oh, I forgot to put the section of railing on that bend. And then you see the whole group fall off and pile down the side of the mountain. And who knows, they've got parachutes like a James Bond film.
I think they ended in terms of emails in my mailbox, or they showed up in the lobby of the festival.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the great early testing points of that was, in order to build a space which you can navigate and feels like a place, then you need to think in terms of the physics of the real world. When I navigate online spaces, then I get lost all the time, because whether they're workspaces in MURAL or different project teams in Asana or documents in Confluence, it's like, where is that? How do I mentally model where that exists in space? Is it up in the left hemisphere of my brain? Is it back behind my ear? I don't know where that is. So as soon as I start thinking about how are we going to be together somewhere, then I think about, well, in what space? What does it look like? How can I use the things that I get from thousands of years of evolution of running around our planet to help me understand where everything is? And then once I understand where things are, like, oh, the studio I want to look up is on the top left, or it's down there by the street level, then at these moments I start getting things for free because I'm just a human. And I submit that even though on the internet, nobody knows if you're a dog, I don't think there are many dogs that came to the conference. So in that space, if you think about the landscape, what's in the landscape? Where do the facilitators, where would they talk about what they do? Well, they'd probably have a studio. So why don't we build some studios? And then it gets into the architecture component. You start looking at, well, so what would that look like? Would they be stacked on top of each other? Are we going to give them mansions? Do you have to drive 5 kilometers to go to all the different studios? Or are they all aggregated together in a village? And then from there, you can start to think about, all right, so what does that village look like? What need to be the components out of it? What templates can I create that people can then inhabit that village? And then from there, then you can take another step in reality and say, well, what is in a studio? And so that's kind of the thinking process into building the template for a world. So what we ended up with at the conference was facilitators having studios, and we primed all those studios with some basic things that a facilitator might have that could be useful to communicate their session or their world behind what brought them to the session. Mm-hmm. And so that's why we ended up with whiteboards and tables. And then from there, you can keep on extending. Well, what's on my table? I need a journal. How do I get ready for the conference? Well, probably there's a mirror. What's in the mirror? Well, the best thing in a mirror is to look at yourself. Mm-hmm. What's your own empathy map? Et cetera, et cetera.
So it's basically using the intuition of the visitor of the mural who doesn't know anything, and then trying to relate to this intuition so that they find their way around.
Yeah, that's a great way to describe it. It's what are the, in user experience design, talk about this idea of affordances.
What are affordances?
So affordances, they help people understand what actions an object affords. So what can I do with that object? How would I expect to be able to interact with the object? It's easy to see how a lot of interfaces on our phones, we have these buttons, everything, we have this flat glass surface, and everything presented to us looks like you can press it like a button on a keyboard. And I suspect if we'd gone from the industrial age straight to smartphones with no digital age between, then your screen on your smartphone would probably have levers that you pulled and pulleys that you wound, because they would be because we would understand how to interact with those objects. And now, even as you observe that, your phone is now, probably if you've got the latest updates, they're removing all the view of the buttons, because you know that when you see the icon that you can interact with it. You don't need the representation of the button. So you can have that within templates, but once you've got in a world that you're navigating, templates tend to be fairly static. You move across the template, whereas in a world you're moving between templates, if you like. So there's this third dimension to the navigation. And so you need to have affordances that you can expect to go somewhere else when you use them, which is how we came up with the doors. The idea that when I see a door, I have the idea that it probably goes somewhere that I can't see right now. But when I open it, I will be able to either look at it or I will arrive there. And one of the things that we have to, some things are inherent that we understand. Other things you need to educate people in. So in the case of our doors, even though all the studios had doors, they all led, if you like, through catacombs in the back of the studio area to different stages in a massive crossover and crisscross. And the doors were available or permanently locked. But I know if a door's locked, I clearly can't use it yet. The moment that it's unlocked, then I can walk through it. So that's kind of some examples of things that you can do in the world. One of the things that I think people didn't look at, and maybe after they listen to this, is that in all the journals, and we made a couple of hundred of them, there's a drawer. And that drawer, if you unlock it, opens and it has stuff in it. But for the casual observer, the entire mural, we were very deliberate in things that we, if you like, in MURAL, facilitator locked, therefore that the guest wouldn't be able to unlock. But there are one or two things that the guest can unlock.
It's a very good point that you're making. And I wonder where this comes from, that there is a kind of respect towards the template that or maybe a lot of users don't dare to interact with it and to play with it and to make it their own. So how can you reduce this fear of breaking something for the user?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And it's inherent in just the same way that you introduce people to the start of the workshop, which is you set a safe space, you say what is acceptable here, what's not acceptable here. You define the moments when you're opening and exploring, which is kind of the yes and game or the no but game of closing and judging. And in the same way, you can get people to use templates in a different way and really own them if you inform them. Okay, at this part, this is now your template. There are many other like it, but this one is yours. And you can pull it apart and change it in any way you like. One of the really great projects I had an opportunity to work on earlier this year was MURAL's inaugural virtual retreat. Nice. And for that retreat, we set across a series of islands, a kind of escape room scenario. And in that scenario, we used the idea of a template that what you're experiencing is you're arriving at a destination. So when you first open it, you see, for example, a coastal area, and there are a number of boats on the shore, and each of those boats you can pick up and move. But we made it a template because it was an escape puzzle, and we wanted people to be able to pull it apart and look at it. And in the briefing, we told them, this is yours. It is just a template. If you break it, you can just make a new mural from the template, and you can try that location again. And so we encourage you to unlock things and pull them apart. And even with that encouragement, what I found was that people viewed the end result as finished, and therefore they were reluctant to pull it apart or to damage it. And this creates another interesting aspect, which is like the cities of New York, and I can't remember which mayor it was. I think he's currently disfavored, but he had a broken windows policy. So if you have streets with broken windows, then people's behavior is going to be different.
Yeah.
They're going to break more windows. Graffiti is going to occur. But if you set an environment which suggests a certain kind of social norm based on our experience, and people tend to behave in that way. So the idea of, for example, a festival space is you want the festival space to feel like you can relax and party and be open with other people, and it's not a place where we're particularly critical in the moment. And so you need to design that with a view of, if it's a joyful environment, it's going to not be dark colors. It's going to be bright colors, festive colors, that it's going to be perhaps not too polished and perfect. It's why we chose, or why it was particularly interesting to look at somewhere which was a town which grew organically. Mm-hmm. You have these planned cities a lot in America, and you have these absolute messes of cities in more medieval towns like the French Riviera. And the more mess of a city also suggests, well, there's all these different places to explore, and there's novelty, and things that invite you to explore invite you to do so and share your exploration, to have novelty, etc.
And I would like to jump on that one, because that's another puzzle that I see, and I would be very curious in your perception. So how can you create an environment that triggers curiosity and the will to interact, so not to leave? Because when you're designing a festival or a workshop experience, you want the participants not to get distracted and open another tab, but you want them to stay there.
Yes, the rabbit hole.
Exactly. On the other hand, you don't want to distract them so much that they don't focus on what you actually want them to do. So you need to be explicit in, okay, this is what you're supposed to do with this template, and still create enough, I would say, decoration or playfulness so that they don't get bored because it's too explicit.
Yeah, I think there's two places where that really comes to light in the festival. One is the studios, and coming back to your earlier question about what is it that you're actually doing when you make a template for these kind of events. When we made the facilitator studios, and I was talking about the guardrails and people going off down the side of the mountain and disappearing, I'd never imagined when we created the facilitator studios that they would decide to have entire photographic wall backgrounds and add plants and trees and their own doors. And the last one, of course, being a challenge, because if somebody has their own door and it's not the kind of door you expect to go through, you are clicking on the door, wondering why you can't get into the garden behind it. So in that way, when you develop the template and you move into it, the facilitators were extremely curious and excited to do it. I remember there were a couple of quotes from, I never knew Mural could be so much fun, because you've given them a space, which is their studio, because we asked them, you can borrow things from other people's studios, but don't steal them. You can copy them and then do whatever you like within that space. And I requested also that they used an illustration style, which kind of lasted until everybody got really excited and realized they could literally do whatever they wanted with the space. And so what enabled that was providing them a defined space to work within and a set of guidelines, but not hard rules. One of the things I like to end out with, here's what we want you to do with this space. Here's some guidelines. And then it can feel very strict. And then at the end say, but don't forget to have fun and do what you want.
Yeah.
Try it. If it doesn't work, don't worry. We'll come up and fix it, and we want you to look good. So if you feel that you don't have the balance and design skills to make it look good, don't worry. We're not going to leave you there. We're going to make it look good. And then when it comes to the journal was a really good example of what you described, because in a journal, the purpose of the journal, why do I have a journal? I have a journal because I want to prepare before I go to my event. I want to be at the event and not miss any of the things I was meant to go to. And afterwards, I really want to make use of that knowledge that I had. And so for it to feel like a journal, it needs a context and a place. And it's well, if facilitators have got their place, then I should have my place or your place. You should have your place. And in your place, we want to give you as many things that make it feel like it's your place and you own it, but not so many things that you're busy doing the rabbit hole of illustrating and putting pictures up in your environment and finding plants and actually missed 3 seminars.
Yeah. And I think also acknowledging that there are some people who do find joy in finding plants and making it their own and really spending time on this decoration. But there are others who just don't feel the urge. And you still want to give them the chance to enjoy the beauty of it, so that they don't have to add extra time and effort and still feel comfortable in their own learning space, which is the journal.
Yeah, and that's really well pointed out. And it's the challenge of what to put in there. And I think the best answer to that is as little as possible. So when you're looking at creating an experience as well, it's what is the minimum thing that I need to do for you to feel like it's a house or your place. If you look at children and they draw a house, it's a square with a triangle on top. And depending on the age of the child, it's got another little rectangle on top with some smoke billowing out of it, a square for the window with a cross in it, and a door. And if you push them in a hurry, it's probably a square for the building, a triangle on top, and a door. Probably doesn't even have a window, or it may have a window and not a door. So in the journal space, it's what are all the superfluous things? Do I need power sockets? No. We had a clock, we had a bookshelf, we had a lamp hanging from the ceiling, and we stripped much of that away because these are really distracting you from the core. And the core is, hey, look at your journal and your calendar, get ready for the event. And sure, you should have a fridge to put photos on. So it's how much can you remove and still have the essence of it is the thinking behind it.
Hi, this is Andrew. I'm a facilitator and head of customer success at Session Lab, the dynamic workshop planner tool. More than 30,000 facilitators, trainers, and coaches use our workshop planner tool and save time and effort in the design process. So, how do they do it? Our drag and drop agenda builder makes it easy to transform your ideas into high-quality workshops, and the timing of your agenda automatically updates when you make changes. You can collaborate in real time with your colleagues and easily share professional-looking printouts with your clients. And if you need inspiration, you can check out our library of more than 500 activities and exercises and simply drag the ones you need right into your workshop agenda. So check out Session Lab to save time and effort in your workshop design process. And now get your first 2 months of Session Lab Pro absolutely free at sessionlab.com/workshopswork.
Which leads me then to the next challenge. Is how do you create this new habit of actually using the journal? Because this is something that I experienced in the process that led to the festival, where I had at one point this amazing idea that we can just use one big mural board as a kind of to take minutes, where we'll record everything that happened in the co-design process with the other facilitators. And at one point, I totally lost track. It was unreadable and nobody actually used it because nobody had the chance to develop this habit of using it. And this is what I have in mind with a journal. So if I'm not used to be on Mural all the time, for instance, so if I don't have the habit to take notes in this style, and then you present this wonderful and beautiful opportunity to me, how do you make sure that I actually use it because it is for my own best interest?
Yeah, I think the first point is I can't make you use something you don't want to use. And I can't encourage you to use something that you don't see the value in. This is really a problem of the intranet design, probably in the early 2000s, of, okay, we're going to have an intranet and all our company employees are going to go there and they're going to read about the latest news that's happening in the accounting department. And,
nobody's interested in the latest news.
They don't want to go. But what people found was, and it was in one way just kind of normal for big companies, the way you got people to go to the intranet was you published the lunch menu on it. And you then put their salary pay date on it, and
the lost and found. The lost and found. And so I can't give you a journal and say, hey, go use the journal because this is going to be beneficial to you. I'm better off putting the planning tool for when the sessions are onto the same journal, which is why we had the calendar at the top of the journal. Is the easiest way for me to plan my sessions is to use that tool. And then I'm on the journal and I have a reason to come back for it. And then I can repurpose that work I've done and move it very much. It comes back to the method. First, I plan my work, then I can use the planning I made to record the results. I can use the results I recorded to then provide further action. So it's a 3-part method, if you like. And that method is then represented as a calendar for planning, the journal for recording, and then the brain dates for afterwards. So basically the journal was structured like an asynchronous workshop as such.
Absolutely. And very, very, very deliberately. And the other thing is we also have to allow for, some people have great calendars and that's what they want to use. So it shouldn't be a forced competition between the two. So one of the things, for example, that we looked at earlier on was how can we make it that every poster has an iCalendar link straight onto it. So I see the poster, I want to go to the session, I double click it, it's in my calendar, I'm good, I move on. For people who are like that, that's great. Personally, I'm really visual. It's much easier for me to see the calendar with the pictures of the people that I'm going to see. And I can click on that and then I can go through the door and I'm in the foyer.
And this is why the agenda, how you designed it, was so brilliant. For a global festival where the sessions start literally at different times, depending on where you live in the world. So how to make it then your own so that by removing certain items, you actually see the time zone where you're in. And this, I think, was one of the biggest then incentives to really use this template, this journal for the participants, because it reduces complexity of the entire program.
Yeah, it's really good you mentioned that. I think that's another example of, earlier on we were talking about how do you provide instruction for some people and none for others who are experienced. And one of the things that you see often in template design is that it's very two-dimensional. So just to recap, what we did for the calendar, of course, is we put all the time zone options all over each other. And then you delete the categories of time zones that you don't want, just thereby whittling it down to the one you do want, or perhaps potentially 2 that you might want. And this idea of a canvas being linear, often you'll see a program and you'll see UTC as one time zone as a horizontal row, then you'll see CET next to it, and you get this kind of 5, 6, 7 rows high of time zones that you probably don't care about. Most people don't really care about other people's time zones. I didn't know
how to do it better before we talked. So that's what the only approach
you're referring to the agenda. Yeah. But the agenda's got a different problem because on the public agenda, you have people from, 5 different time zones all looking at the same document. And there's another aspect is you want people to see that what people are looking at. One of the great things of looking at that agenda is when you go in and you view it, which is, of course, if you ever make something like a template, then you must view people using it because they will use it in surprising and alarming ways that just aren't you, because you're just one kind of person and there are many, many different kinds of people. And so you see their cursors with their names. They'll stop on a poster and then it'll be there for 15, 20 seconds. Then it'll jump to somewhere else. And then you realize at this moment that a lot of people, it's like reading a book with a pen, where they trace where they're going, and you'll see them almost look at the words and the cursor will be moving along the words as they read them. It's really interesting. And so in that space, you want to have all the time zones because you want all the people from all the time zones to see each other's behavior. What are they stopping and looking at? But the minute that you're not in that space and you're in a private space, all that other information is irrelevant. And at that moment, you want to change the thinking behind it. And that's why we went for a series of time zones where you can pull off the tabs that don't matter to you and just see the one you want. And we do that, of course, with having all the time zones layered on top of each other. So at first glance, you don't see 5 time zones in a big mess all over the place. You really just see the front time zone. And that third dimension of using the third dimensional space is an aspect of template design that I think is really underutilized. I think that comes back to, you can apply that for how do I provide instructions to some but hide them for others? Or why, if I've got a...
how would you do that?
Well, first of all, you can remove it from the canvas into the outline, but then you can also use objects to obscure the instruction. If I had a big question mark with a circle around it, for example, which is a very simple example, then visually that's just a question mark and I can see it. But what if I grab the question mark, drag it out of the way to reveal the instructions, which is a whole bunch of text, which is very distracting. And when I'm done, I can just slide it back over the top. So it's there, it's present, it's at the location of the exercise I'm doing, but it's not distracting the people who don't need to see it all the time. I can reveal it when I need and I can hide it again. But to do that, you have to imagine that the canvas is, you have to take that virtual reality and think of the physical space. Well, if I have a desk, I have things under things on a desk. That doesn't describe my desk at all, but
describes mine.
So I lose things. So where is that Post-it note? I put a book on top of it. Right. Thought gone. So applying that makes a lot of sense in canvas space as well. And another example is, you see a lot of workshop methods that result in a categorization, a 2-dimensional categorization, like a grid, do it now, do it, decide when, dump it, delegate it, these kind of D4 decision matrices. Or you see complexity. When you look at categorizing, for example, in Agile, you have this kind of 2-aspect matrix about how hard is it to do it and how well is the solution known. And this, you ask people to prioritize on 2 axes. And then afterwards, you reveal which segment in that graph is the part we need to focus on. Now, this is often done of dividing Post-it notes into 4 quadrants and then taking them and dragging them somewhere else and working with them. But you could also, behind that grid they're working on, have an underlay, which you pull off, and then it highlights one particular section.
Yeah, I think we tend to forget that we can work with different layers.
Yes.
In the virtual space. Because
it's not a spreadsheet.
Yeah,
right?
It is not. Yeah. We're a little bit running out of time, and I just realized that I haven't asked you any of my standard questions.
Oh, okay.
I have to run through them now. What for you makes a workshop fail?
Lack of alignment of people going into the workshop about what we're going to do, why we're going to do it, and what is our end goal. They're the guiding stars. If I can always point to the end goal, I can bring people back onto track, but they have to agree to it before we get there.
And what's your favorite exercise?
My favorite exercise of all time is any kind of cross-team competitive exercise. So we were doing some work I was back for Intercontinental Hotel Group a long time ago now, and they were sponsoring the Olympics in London. So it gives you an idea of how long ago it was. And they said, we want to take all the exercises that you do and we're sponsoring the Olympics. Can you do something with that? And we're like, oh yeah, sure. Great. So what we did was they were coming up with ideas which were effectively competitive ideas to bring their company forward for the hotel owners. And we looked at how could we turn each of these into some kind of competition? So we had, for example, one of the exercises you can do is you can say, what's really a benefit of our service or offering? And then you can have a counterpoint where the next team says, no, I'm going to tell you why you're wrong. And then you can have a final group which says, which of the 2 is actually telling the truth and which one is, just a little bit overly optimistic about themselves. So we designed that as a 2-track race. So on one track, people put down Post-it notes. This is why we're great. This is why we're great. This is why we're great. They pass it to the next group, and you can imagine a big circle of about 15 teams. They pass it to the next team who says, kind of racing up the other track on the inner track, no, that's why you're not great. That's why you're not great. That's why you're not great. And then you pass it over to the next team, which at each of those track points says, yes, this team was right. That team was right. And then out of all the points that they put down on the track running towards the end, Each one gets a score, and whoever got the highest score got the furthest down the track. You have a winner. Move on. And so it's that kind of competitive setup, and where it's fun.
Mm-hmm.
A similar one we did for BMW in Beijing was to look at, you've got two cars, funnily enough, BMWs, on a track. And we actually did this, put a paper road down the table. Mm-hmm. We put two metal BMW cars, like real cars, on the end. And then each team had to create roadblocks for the other one. So you get Post-it notes, you fold them up vertically, you bend them at the sticky part so they're sticking up vertically. They each create roadblocks for the other one. And then once they're kind of done with their roadblock preparation, each team has to then take a roadblock, solve it with what is the solution to this particular problem, and then progress their car down the table. And so you get this real excitement between the teams as they're trying to solve the problem and move down. And it creates this very pleasurable and very light-hearted competition between the teams as they solve the problems. The only challenge with that is that sometimes they get carried away with the race rather than the quality of their answers. Then you judge it at the end to see whether it's true.
I can also see this sense of progress. So you're working on a challenge and you have something tangible that you solved it, so you can put it on a stack.
Yeah, that's right. It's the two racing car progress bar down the road.
Yeah, and you can perfectly do this online.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Beautiful.
There's a warm-up exercise. It was made by some, I think It Done, and it's called Obstacle Course. Mm-hmm. And it does a similar thing. You set everybody at one side, if you like, on the left, and then you ask them to perform a series of actions of creating Post-it notes, deleting them, typing them in, changing the color, to learn the tool. But what you're seeing as you run 10 people through it is who's ahead, who's behind, come on, hurry up. And you create this kind of fun competition between it. And often with those kind of exercises, people want to do it again. Mm-hmm. And it's, you've done well when people want to do it again.
Yeah. Yeah. And when they share it with others.
Yes. Yeah.
Awesome. After all these learnings and reflections after the festival, what is the one thing regarding the design, production of the mural and the UX that you would have liked to know earlier? Because it might have changed something in how you worked.
I would have liked to have spent more time ideating all the potential spaces. I think as we started to build the world, we came up with new ideas of things that we wanted to do. Mm. And I'm sure that came because we didn't enable a long enough ideation period specifically on the experiences and affordances. Mm. And that makes it very challenging to put in a new building or a new space. And the thing, if I can answer the opposite question, the thing I'm very pleased that we thought about was the work process or the experience mapping, the experience map for people through the festival to the stage. And really importantly, on the back of that, what is the service design, or you might think about the practical service design of being able to service people moving through the world, and what happens if it breaks at a certain point? Can we in real time fix that? Mm. Why we spent so much time to make the journals really perfect, because once we take the template and distribute it a couple of 100 times, then retroactively any mistake you made is very difficult to solve.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So more ideation on the potential uses and service design for how do you actually run it.
And yeah, the challenge that I hear, or I want to hear, is you basically have to design something with the end in mind. Mm-hmm. But by the nature of the festival, never done before, we didn't even know what the end would be. And whether the end is actually the end or just the beginning of something new. So how can you design something with the end in mind if you don't know the end? And how can you include this in the design process so that you always have a little bit of leverage to fill in some random idea that pops up along the way?
So that was really good, because in about just near the end of the ideation process, we had that concept that this is the beginning of a world.
Mm.
And so actually designing the peninsula of the French Riviera was deliberate, that on the, if you like, to the south, you can extend out into the water and other places and islands, and why limit it to land? Why not have the next festival on a boat off the coast of Monaco,
Or in the desert.
Yeah, or underwater in a Greek submerged temple. But on the other hand, is you can extend it back inland into what does the rest of the landmass hold in terms of valleys and mountains and plains and forests and lakes, and have the festival at any one of those locations. So I think what makes any world richer is to think about, from the piece of the world that I'm seeing is just a slice of that world, and what is in the rest of the world, and how does it behave, and what are the rules of that universe? Like on that hill, where in the hill behind the facilitator studios is the entrance to the catacombs, and where does that go to?
Yeah, so excited about Never Done Before 2021.
Yes, there's a lot of different spaces we can go to.
Yes. And we'll explore that in a different conversation. Since now we are actually close to the hour. If someone...
Time flies when you're having fun.
Yes. If someone fell asleep after minute 1, just woke up and doesn't have time to listen to the entire show again, what would you like them to walk away with? So,
hi, welcome back, and I hope you had a nice sleep. The one thing that we hope you gathered from this particular podcast is that when you're designing a workshop or a world, don't think about what it is you're putting on the page. Think about what is the story and the method behind it, because that is where you find the thing that will really bring it to life for the people.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing, explaining.
Thanks a lot for having me.
Wonderful. Looking forward to more collaboration along the way.
When set with the challenge of never done before, it becomes increasingly difficult to satisfy that, which just makes it more fun.
Yes, and I'm sure that you will always find something that you haven't done before that we can add to the journey.
Hopefully. Life is about learning. So thank you for having me today.
Thank you. Thank you for staying tuned and listening to the show. I appreciate your attention, as I know how busy you are. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and engage by sharing your comments and thoughts, and visit workshops.work to download the one-page summary. I'm looking forward to seeing you back at the next episode, and I wish you a fruitful day.